Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Smart Centres Index number 9 global launch. I'm very pleased to be here today. I'm very conscious of the fact that we have a live audience, but we also have an audience that looks at these events on playback, and you are all very, very welcome indeed. I won't do the good morning, good afternoon, or good evening thing because you're all from around the world. But it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Ian Harris. Next slide, please, so that people can see that that is absolutely true. And I am one of the founder directors of the Xian Group, and it's my job to host the event today. Next slide, please. The program is a very straightforward one, and we're keeping it fairly brief for you today. So welcome to introduction. Here I am. I doubt if I will get to 9:05 with my introduction, but around about that sort of time, Mike Wardle will present the results of the Smart Centres Index number 9. I have a few observations of my own that I would like to share with you once Mike has been through the results. And then we will take questions, comments, and answers from the people who are joining us live today. We love people to ask questions and give us comments at these events. And just in case there's anybody out there who's not familiar with the way that these Xian broadcasts work, we are within the GoToWebinar environment here. You need to use the questions button within GoToWebinar. So some of you might know me and Mike and be able to send us texts and emails, and it's always lovely to hear from you, but we won't be seeing any of those things while we're locked in this sort of GoToWebinar enclosed world during the broadcast. So the way to get to us during the broadcast is through the GoToWebinar questions. We will endeavour to handle all of those questions for you. Next slide, please. So it is my pleasure to introduce Mike Wardle, our Chief Executive Officer, who will be presenting the results of the Smart Centres Index. There is no one in the world better qualified to present these results to you. Mike, I've known for very many years, and beneath that smart exterior, I have to tell you, there is also a smart centre. So Mike really is the right person to be talking to you, and I'm the right person to stop right now and hand over to Mike. So Mike, please let us know what the results are.
Well, thank you very much, Ian. I'm not sure whether Smart Centre or Soft Centre, but nonetheless, here we are. Just by way of introduction, I guess, we've been doing research into cities, places where clusters of commercial and financial activity come together for nearly 20 years. The Global Financial Centres Index in its 35th edition, the Global Green Finance Index and the Smart Centres Index are a bit newer, but they focus on key areas of development which are taking attention at the moment. The Smart Centres Index is designed to track the ability of commercial centres to create, develop and deploy technology. So we're really focused here not on finance, but on the application of technology and science to a whole range of areas of the economy. And we're hoping to help investors, governments and regulators understand what it is that's driving centre performance in terms of technology development. The SCI is a factor assessment index. This means that we combine two sets of data. First of all, perception data. We run a survey asking people about the strengths of particular centres that they know. And we combine that perception data with quantitative data using advanced statistical modelling, effectively to use the assessments given in the survey to weight the quantitative data in the index rather than us having to decide which of the quantitative measures should carry more weight than others. And in the Smart Centres Index, we measure three dimensions. First of all, innovation, the support, which is the approach taken to regulation and other support for the innovation and technology industry. provided by the commercial ecosystem and by government. Creative intensity, the extent to which technology and innovative industries are embedded in the economy of the centre. So not just places where they're doing a small bit of technology, but we're interested to look at places where actually technology and innovation is embedded throughout the economy. And delivery capability, the quality of work being undertaken in this field in that particular centre. So 3 different aspects of development. In terms of who we're tracking, we now have 79 centres in the Smart Centres Index, with Jersey and Bermuda joining the index in this edition. There are clusters of centres in Western Europe, in North America, Asia Pacific, and the Middle East. They provide the bulk of the centres that get into the index. But we're tracking over 130 centres, and we expect to see more enter the index as time goes on, as data builds. So the headlines for this edition. First of all, London retained its first place in the index. Interestingly, Zurich rose to second place, with New York down 1 place to third. So a little bit of movement at the very top of the index. 5 Western European centres feature in the top 10, alongside 3 US centres, with Singapore and Tel Aviv also featuring in the top 10. There's been a reasonable amount of stability in the rankings in the index. 6 centres rose 10 or more places, while 11 centres fell 10 or more places. So that's an indication really that quite a lot of people are maintaining or not moving very much in terms of the ranking. However, the ratings on which the rankings are based have shifted a bit. The average rating SCI 9 fell by just over 1.3%. The smallest reduction in average ratings was in Latin America and the Caribbean, while in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, the average rating fell almost 2%. So perhaps a little bit of less confidence in technology centres across the world, and perhaps not surprising against geopolitical threats that we're very familiar with. In terms of respondents, who it is who gets involved in the research, we have a wide range of people working across various aspects of industry, with almost a quarter coming directly from people working in technology, but another 20% coming from people working in professional services. Across the world, most respondents come from Asia Pacific, Western Europe, and Middle East and Africa, but we do have people responding to the survey from all regions of the world. In terms of the top 20 centres, just a note that there has been a fall in ratings across the board, as I've already mentioned. So Geneva, Seattle, and Malta are bucking the trend amongst the top 20. North America, Western Europe are strongly represented in the top 20, and this is a feature, I think, of the technology world. But Singapore, Hong Kong, and Busan are performing particularly well from Asia Pacific. Tel Aviv and Dubai take 10th and 13th place from the Middle East and Africa region, but no other regions of the world are represented in the top 20. In terms of the leading centres, top 5 centres over time, you see there's a kind of narrowing of the scores. London does have a clear lead, and as I mentioned, New York has fallen behind Zurich. Oxford and Cambridge, which of course are close to London, and we always have to bear in mind the Golden Triangle, but we do treat them as distinct centres, take 4th and 5th places. Just to say that in this edition, Singapore dropped from 3rd to 7th position, so dropped out of this top 5 group. And we do track the 3 dimensions in the SCI across the centres. In broad terms, centres in Western Europe score higher for innovation support, and centres in Asia Pacific and North America score higher for creative intensity than the other dimensions. And so we will continue to track those differences as we move forward. I'm particularly interested, perhaps, that centres in Western Europe appear to be better in terms of the regulatory and other innovation support than other places in the world. I'm going to run through some of the results that we have from each of the regions that we track. There's 26 centres in Western Europe, who we track in the index. 10 of those feature in the top 20 in the world. Geneva, Malta, and Hamburg performed very strongly in the index. And just outside this table, but Jersey joined the index for the first time. In this table, Jersey joins the index in 26th place overall. In North America, we have 9 North American centers. 3 are in the world top 10. And Seattle, as we mentioned before, moved up 9 ranking places, a really good improvement. And it's the only North American center to improve its rating. 5 North American centers now feature in the top 20. In Asia Pacific, we've mentioned Singapore, Hong Kong, and Busan. And just to note that all centers here in this region fell in the ratings, even where their ranking improved. And 11 of the 21 centers in the region either maintained or rose in the rankings in SCI 9, really showing that the centers outside this top 15 performed a little better than those at the top of the table in Asia Pacific. Looking at Eastern Europe and Central Asia, Cyprus continues to lead the region. Sofia moved up 5 ranked places to take second place at 48th globally. But again, most centres fell in the rankings and all centres fell in the ratings, with this region having the largest average reduction in the rating across the board. In the Middle East and Africa, rather more mixed picture. Some centres up in the rankings, and have to mention Abu Dhabi, Doha, and Mauritius, all of which rose 7 places in the rankings, with other centres falling in the rankings and stable in the ratings, or falling. Tel Aviv continues to lead the region, but fell 3 ranking places. Dubai moved up 3 places to 13th. In Latin America and the Caribbean, Bermuda enters the Smart Centres Index for the first time and moved into the leading place in the region in 59th position in the world. Cayman Islands had a good performance in this edition, rising 10 ranked places to take second position in the region. I'm going to move on a little bit to talk about the taxonomy we use and the areas of competitiveness in the Smart Centres Index. The quantitative measures we use, the instrumental factors, we group into 6 different areas: technology, financial services, reputational, business environment, human capital, and infrastructure. And we can construct sub-indices which take account of the quantitative measures in each of those areas and then combine them with the survey results. You'll see that the leading centres have strengths across the board. London and New York taking first and second place in most of the areas, Zurich taking second place, and third place and fourth place. So a remarkably consistent set of results there. But there are particular individual centres which are stronger in particular areas. For example, Dubai, though it comes 13th in the overall index, is 7th in technology, comes 6th in business environment and human capital. We can mention Busan, that comes 6th in infrastructure and in general reputation. So particular centres have particular strengths as shown by the data. And just taking the technology effects, one of the sets of data of the instrumental factors is focused on technology. And if we compare the overall results of the SCI with the sub-index relating to technology, we see that some centres, such as Singapore, Hong Kong, Dubai, Shenzhen, perform particularly well in this measure. So if we were just tracking the technology factors, we'd see those centres doing rather better in the index than they do in the overall SCI when we take account of the broad range of factors. This brings me on to reputational advantage. This is where we measure the overall rating in the SCI with the average assessment that we receive from the SCI survey. In effect, what this does is to say, what is the effect of reputation in terms of either giving people a higher rating in the SCI or a lower rating in the SCI. This group here, the top 15 in terms of reputational advantage, shows those centres that have a high reputational advantage. That is, people in the survey are scoring them, we believe, probably in advance of where they ought to be scored based on the quantitative data alone. So these people have been good at marketing themselves and building a reputation for their technology and innovation. And sometimes that reputational advantage is well justified, but we think there's a risk for these centres that they are slightly over marketing themselves. At the other end of the table, we talk about reputational disadvantage for the lowest 15 in the index. These are places that on the quantitative data we think are doing rather better than the assessment people give them in the SCI survey. So places like Mexico, Tokyo, Istanbul, Warsaw have a negative reputational advantage, which means if only they were able to explain more clearly what was happening in their centre, we think they would perform better in the overall SCI. So there's an indication there that there's a marketing gap which they could fill. I'm going to hand back to Ian now for some of his observations. And Ian, back over to you.
Right, thank you. I get the opportunity to do this next slide thing bit, which Mike didn't get as he's doing the slides. So next slide, please, Mike. So they've seen my picture of my face enough. I was actually very interested this time. Mike has chosen to do some regional breakdowns, which he's shown you. This is relatively new for this index, not for indices that Tien does generally. But actually last time, and I think maybe the time before, we gave you one or two examples of the regional differences in assessments for certain centres. And this time we picked out the difference between the assessments for New York and the assessments for Los Angeles, which we think is rather interesting. So New York is reputationally somewhat disadvantaged in Western Europe and reputationally advantaged in Middle East and Africa and roughly neutral in North America. And then you can see sort of positively, a bit positively in Asia Pacific, a bit positively in Eastern Europe, a bit positively elsewhere. Los Angeles, actually that pattern is very different. In Western Europe, people look on Los Angeles more positively than the instrumental factors might suggest, and in Asia Pacific more negatively, and in North America more positively, and across other parts of the world perhaps a little more negatively. I think it's quite important to say these are not enormous data sets, so I wouldn't read too much into this, but it is interesting to us anyway to see that the reputation of different centres, even in what you might think of as being the same part of the world, can be very different in different parts of the world. And in the case of this one, where both of the centres that we've chosen to look at are in North America, their perception within North America is actually quite different, with Los Angeles showing more positively than New York. I think that is an interesting set of findings, and particularly for those of you out there who are interested in building reputation as part of demonstrating that your smart centres are effective. It is something that you need to look at across all of these different regions, I would argue. Next slide, please, Mike. I've been through this before, and I'm not suggesting that things have changed all that much, but I think it's very interesting to think about the correlation between where centres are in the SCI and the particular instrumental factors that might be of interest. I think it's the thing that is most surprising of all to me, actually, is that the correlation is not greater on some of the factors than we see here. So I imagine some of you would expect a little bit more than a 0.6 correlation between Fintech activity index and whether a centre shows on the smart centres index or not. But 0.6 is as far as it goes. For those of you who are not familiar with R squared, if you get to an R squared of 1, it means that it's a perfect correlation. If you have an R squared of 0, it means that there is no correlation at all, or an inverse of correlation. Urban mobility is similar to Fintech. The Global Innovation Index, again, similar, around about that 0.6 mark. And then not as far away, things like the Global Green Finance Index, which is one of ours, and the Global Financial Centres Index, which is one of ours, is close to 0.6 as well. Can we move on to the next slide, please, Mike? Which shows correlation with technology factors. Here, again, I think interesting, the fintech activity, which I showed before, and the fintech index in GFCI, 0.6 and 0.5. And then some of these other factors that I might have thought would correlate quite strongly don't. So scientific infrastructure, only 0.36. Smart city index, 0.34. Creative outputs, 0.34. Technological infrastructure, 0.33. So there's no one factor or small handful of factors that you can say that's the thing to latch onto. If you get that factor right, you will show well on the SCI. And I think this reputational stuff is actually hugely important to what we see, as we'll come back to that in a few moments. Can we see the next slide, please, Mike? This is an interesting question. Around technology development. What technology developments are likely to have the most impact on industry over the next 5 years? And I think this is an interesting question. We've asked it before. I think it's a question that we should continue to ask and see if we get trends on this question. It's not a question where you can really divide these things up into mutually exclusive categories. So it's interesting that 25% of people say artificial intelligence, digital and computing. But of course, almost all of the other factors that are on this pie, the technological development that is likely to affect them is things like artificial intelligence, digital and computing. So I guess that people in that 25% that identify that as the key factor are possibly in pure play technological computing industries, or are in sectors that are not in and of themselves technological, but they feel that their back offices, or in the case of finance, perhaps front offices, will be affected by artificial intelligence, for example, generally. Perhaps more interesting is to see energy and environmental as the next biggest category there, although similar percentage to electronics and quantum and similar percentage to biotechnology, and those three together taking up half the pie. With 7% in health, 8% in robotics, and 6% in material science and the like. Next slide, please. This is a slide we haven't shown before, but we think is interesting. Universities' performance. The number of universities in the world's top 10 looks like this, and this is intriguing because most of our SCI top 10 are in the US or the UK, and then of course we've got Singapore and Switzerland represented as well, and indeed the US and the UK are showing very strongly in areas such as physical sciences, engineering, life sciences and computer sciences in the top 10 rankings of the universities of the world. So we think that strength in the university sector in these technology subjects might be a key factor in the success of those US sectors, and for example, Oxford and Cambridge in the UK. So 9 of the 10 top ranked centres of the SCI are in countries featured in the university's top 10 table. Mike and I have had a conversation offline about how interesting this is, and maybe next time we'll show the top 20 or something like that to just see if broadening it beyond the top 10 shows us any more insight than that. This time around, it doesn't really show us very much more insight. This is the big story on university performance, and that I think is the story to show you this time. Next slide, please, Mike. I think we're now going to want to take questions from people. And indeed, we have some. Excellent. Thanks very much, everyone who sent in questions. I will try to cover all of these questions in the short amount of time that we have still available. In fact, there are several questions that I would choose to group together, with apologies to you not reading these out as individual questions. But there are several questions around sort of anti-globalization, or the theme that we see in globalization being less in favor today, or as one person describes it, global fragmentation. And the question really is this having an impact on the results of the Smart Centres Index, Mike?
Well, thank you very much. It's a little bit difficult to say. I think it probably is. And the reason I say that is the showing of Chinese centres in the index, who are not perhaps performing as strongly as you might expect, even what we know about the extent of technology development in China. But certainly talking to people in China and Hong Kong about the effect of the current view of the US around technology transfer and technology sharing, they certainly see that as having a potential impact on their ability to operate global business, which is for some of them their ambition. So I think people are factoring in that Chinese centres maybe are going to have some difficulty in the current climate, as long as there is suspicion around the transfer of technology between the US and China, and that does seem to be having some impact on the placing of Chinese centres. But that some of that is, we don't go out and ask survey respondents exactly why they give the responses they do, but that's my impression at present.
Thanks, Mike. I think there's a good answer to that question. There's a question here from Hugh Purser, and thanks very much, Hugh, for writing this one in. I'll try to paraphrase it a little bit. Does the data in the SCI take account of components such as technology and human capital? And if so, can we assess the extent to which these factors are domestically generated or bought in these centres?
Yes, I think that we do take account of quantitative measures on human capital as well as technology. And the answer, as always, is slightly mixed. The most successful centres seem to be good at growing their own talent through supporting the university sector, but also in being open places for inward migration. People, for example, look at Abu Dhabi and Dubai as places where they think they have some of this balance right, both in terms of growing their own talent, but also making it an attractive offer for people to come to live and work in those areas. Singapore, we know, has made great efforts in that area as well. So the answer appears to be to grow your own talent and to make it easy for people to come and join in. And indeed, places like London and New York, equally have that tradition of both homegrown and imported talent. And in terms of technology, it really does seem to be a very strong correlation with the strength of the university sector alongside human talent, immigration. So having a strong university sector and good immigration policies is likely to lead to success in this area.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question, and this one comes from Bob McDowell. And thank you, Bob, for this question. How important is government investment in the results of the Smart Index and the development of smart centres?
We don't track this directly in terms of government investment, but those centres which are at the top of the table in the top 20 are those centres where they have a high level of what we've described as innovation support. So this mix of regulatory support, government support, ecosystem support, which makes things easier in terms of building technology industries. So we don't track directly the level of government support or subsidy, but it does seem that having a supportive ecosystem, including government policy support, does help to build technology centres.
Terrific. Thanks very much to everyone for their questions. I had some questions in my back pocket that I haven't used because you very kindly chimed in with questions from the floor. So those sorts of questions will have to wait till next time, where I'm hoping we'll see even more trends, and that will be nice and interesting when we do Smart Centres Index 10. That will be November. And if you take the slides, you'll be able to click straight through to the survey, or just enter into your browser www.smartcensusindex.net/survey, and please get those survey answers in. For those of you who are into all of our, sorry, if you can just go back, Mike, I was going to give the dates of the Global Financial Centers Index, which is September. The next one will be number 36, and the Global Green Finance Index will come out in October. That will be number 14. Next slide. Sorry to go backwards and forwards. The next slide, I think, is going to be telling us forthcoming events. No, they're not. You've lost me. Thank you. So Thursday, the 30th of May, Like a Duck to Water, empowering diverse and creative thinking for London's future success. That's today. That's, in fact, in 90 minutes' time. So those of you who are real enthusiasts for our webinars, you can make a whole morning of it. Friday, the 31st of May, that's tomorrow, the City, resilient against the global terror threat. So for those of you who are into that sort of thing, that should be a very interesting webinar. And then one that's very close to my heart, Thursday, the 6th of June, Fish, Food and Finance, a journey through London, with Rupert from the Marine Stewardship Council. Of course, we've done a lot of work with them over the years, and the price of fish, which is one of my babies, uses lots of examples from their fishy story. But it should be a very, very interesting webinar for those of you interested in that sort of thing. If you want to look at our forthcoming events generally, click the link for forthcoming events, or just go and have a look on our website. And if you want to watch this webinar, it will be ready in a couple of days' time. And if you want to watch any past webinars, they're all there on our YouTube channel, and they all get lots and lots and lots of views. So just to say thank you to Mike for his presentation, very helpful, and thank you to those of you who have come to visit us today, and for those of you who are watching on catch up. And we'll see you all very, very soon. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.